There's always some kind of new drama swirling around the royals, right? Well, a new claim is making the rounds, and it's one that could seriously shake up a very, very public story. We're going to get into a controversy that's been reignited, and it all boils down to one seemingly simple detail: Meghan Markle's age.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The big question that's bubbling up again is this: does Meghan's real age actually match the story the public has been told for years? Her official birthday is listed as August 4th, 1981, but a pretty well-known biographer is reportedly challenging that timeline, and in a big way.
So, who's the one stirring the pot here? His name is Tom Bower, and you should know, he's not just some random commentator. He's built this reputation in Britain as an investigative biographer who really goes after powerful people with some seriously detailed research. So whether you're a fan of his or not, when Bower presents a case, people, well, they tend to listen. And that's exactly why this story is getting so much attention beyond the usual gossip.
First things first, let's unpack the so-called paper trail. The investigation that Bower reportedly did seems to hinge on documentary evidence that people who believe this theory say is pretty hard to just ignore.
So the first key piece of evidence that's being pointed to is a real physical magazine from way back in her early years. According to the reports, there was a feature on Meghan Markle that ran in a March 1997 issue of 17 magazine.
And in that feature from 1997, Meghan Markle was reportedly listed as being 21 years old. That number, 21, that's the detail that really kicks this whole thing off and creates the first major inconsistency.
Okay, so let's just do the math here, because this is where it gets pretty interesting. If Meghan was born in 1981, she would have been about 15, maybe 16 years old in March of 1997, but the magazine says she was 21. I mean, that's a pretty big gap, several years, and it's a detail like that that makes people start asking questions. All right, so moving on from print to the digital world. The next piece in this trail is a source that probably all of us have used when we're looking up an actor: her IMDb profile. And for an actor, that page is basically their professional resume, so you'd think the details would be pretty important.
So what Bower's investigation reportedly found was that for a while, Meghan's IMDb page didn't say 1981. It listed her birth year as 1977. That's a whole 4-year difference. Now look, it could have just been a simple typo, of course, but the critics, who say they've saved screenshots of this, see it as part of a bigger pattern that makes them want to dig a little deeper. But this whole case doesn't just lean on documents and websites. It also brings in personal accounts. Bower's investigation apparently included talking to people from Meghan's past. And this is where the focus shifts from the paper trail to what people actually remember. So then the story moves to her time in college at Northwestern University. Official records, they show she graduated in 2003, which totally lines up with her timeline. But Bower reportedly looked closer. One detail that keeps getting brought up is a photo from a university salsa club. Reports claim some of the other students in that picture were born in the early 1970s, which would suggest her friends were maybe a bit older. And to add to that, an unnamed former classmate was apparently quoted as saying people just quietly assumed she was older than she said she was.
And of course, the story gets even more complicated when it turns to her family. Specifically, accounts from her father, Thomas Markle, and her half-sister, Samantha Markle.
Samantha Markle has reportedly claimed in the past that she remembers growing up feeling much closer in age to Meghan than the official timeline would suggest. Think about it. If Meghan was born in 1981, the age gap between them is about 17 years. That's a huge difference. But if the timeline were different, that gap would shrink, which might line up more with what Samantha remembers. And here's another one of those super specific stories that gets brought up. Meghan reportedly claimed she met the actress Yasmin Bleeth when she was working at a yogurt shop. She was 13, she said, and she congratulated Bleeth on her deodorant commercial. The thing is, that commercial reportedly came out in 1997, and if Meghan was born in 81, she would have been around 16 years old in 1997, not 13. It's these little timeline puzzles that really keep the debate going. So you've got this magazine article, an IMDb page, stories from family and classmates. How does all of this stuff get woven together into one big theory? Let's take a look at how a counter-narrative like this actually gets built. It usually follows this kind of pattern. First, you find one core thing that doesn't quite add up, like that 17 magazine article. Then you start layering on these anecdotal stories from people, like classmates or family. After that, you go back and look at official records to see if there are any weird changes.
And finally, you take all those little pieces and assemble them into a brand new theory that challenges the official story. And speaking of re-examining official records, another detail that's gotten a lot of attention is an update that was made to her son Archie's birth certificate. At first, it reportedly listed her full name, Rachel Meghan Markle, but later on it was changed to just her royal title, taking her first and middle names right off of it.
So, what was the reaction from Meghan's side? Well, reports suggest she was, not surprisingly, not happy with any of these claims. Her legal team stepped in, calling all the talk inaccurate and harmful. And while her supporters would say, why would you dignify baseless claims with a detailed response, her critics point out that Meghan herself has never publicly addressed these specific timeline issues in detail. And for them, that silence just leaves the door wide open for more speculation.
And that brings us to what's really the most crucial part of this whole thing: trying to separate this giant mountain of speculation from what might just be a tiny molehill of actual verifiable proof.
I think this chart really sums up where things stand. The number of claims being reported, it's high. The amount of public scrutiny, also very high. But when it comes to that definitive slam-dunk proof that could just end the debate once and for all, well, that's really, really low. We're pretty much left with a collection of claims, not any kind of solid conclusion.
And this really gets to the heart of why this controversy has so much staying power. For the people who are questioning the official story, this isn't really about whether Meghan is a few years older. It's about what that could represent, an alleged pattern of building a public story that might not totally line up with the facts. The age question is just the doorway into a much bigger conversation about authenticity and trust.
In the end, what we're really seeing here is a huge collision of two totally different stories. One side sees a bunch of coincidences and simple mistakes that are being blown out of proportion by critics. The other side sees a trail of inconsistencies that suggest the official story we've been told might not be the whole story. And that really leaves us with a final, pretty big question to think about. When a public figure's story gets challenged by a bunch of alleged discrepancies like this, what do we, the public, choose to believe? Do we stick with the official record that's been there for years, or do we believe the new story that's been pieced together from all the little details left behind?